Ezekiel 37. It's the Valley of Dry Bones. Is that a familiar story at all to any of you? We sang the song Ezekiel. Not familiar to anyone. So maybe I'm giving you a whole new context this morning. Okay, so I'm going to read. I don't have a PowerPoint today because my sweet husband worked so hard on that video. I don't know how to do PowerPoint. He does it for me. So I don't have that this morning. But I'm reading from the Message version today because I think it paints a really clear picture of what's going on in this valley. So verses 1 and 2. Ezekiel is talking, and he says, and let me say this. This particular story is a vision. It's a dream that God gave him. So it didn't actually physically happen. So just so you know that. Okay, verses 1 and 2. It says, God grabbed me, and he took me up, and he set me down in the middle of a valley, full of bones. And he made me walk around among them. So many bones. There were bones everywhere. Dry bones, bleached by the sun. So what God has done is he has picked Ezekiel up and he's put him in a valley, really at the scene of a war. Obviously the war is long over, and the only thing that remains are the bones of the dead from the war. And Ezekiel stands there in that valley and he's totally surrounded by death. And I think God does this so that Ezekiel can experience the tragedy. So that Ezekiel can look at the bones and see the hopelessness in them. And just what death really looks like, the finality of it. So you might say to yourself, what does a man standing in a valley of bones have to do with you this morning? Well, I'm going to give you two things that I think that can apply to your life about this valley of bones. One, some of you might actually be the dry bones. And two, all of us have a valley of dry bones around us. So what do I mean by that? I think the dry bones are a nice metaphor for spiritual death. That valley of bones can represent people who don't know the Lord, who are hopeless because they don't know God. They don't have an eternal future with God. But I also think we can have moments of dryness in our own spiritual life, whether it be in our prayer life or reading our scripture. There are just times where we feel dry, like, okay, I believe in God, but I don't know what to do with that. And I don't really feel motivated to learn what to do with that. And those are what we would call moments of dryness. And from an external perspective, what is the valley of dry bones around you? For some of you, it could be your immediate family. Some of you might be here because your parents don't know the Lord. And for all of you, I think your valley is your high schools right now. Or maybe if you have a job, your workplace. You probably have, 5, 6, 7 classes a day in high school, somewhere in there. And if you were to go through each and every one of those classrooms, can you name the people in each one of those classes who know the Lord and those who don't know the Lord? And I bet the answer is, when you add them up, that there are more people that you encounter in your high school in one day that don't know God than do. And so all of us, all of you, are surrounded by a valley of people who are spiritually dead, who don't know God. So Ezekiel's in this valley. What does God want him to do in it? God said to him, Son of man. Now, if you go back and look through all the stories in Ezekiel, every time God said for Ezekiel to do something nutty, he addressed him, Son of man. So I'm sure at this point, when Ezekiel hears that, I just wonder if he inwardly cringes. Or if he's excited about it. We don't have really any indication of what he thinks about all the things he's doing. But God says to him, Son of man, can these bones live? In other words, Ezekiel, do you see hope in this valley? And Ezekiel answers him, Master God, only you know that. In other words, I was kind of surprised actually by this, that Ezekiel didn't say, yes, I see hope, yes, I see life. He doesn't say that. And I think part of the reason is he sees and feels how hopeless death is and how final it is. And from a human perspective, bones can't live. My son has a bleached cow head hanging over his bed. And when he was younger, he he used to ask me at bedtime, he was like, Mama, can that thing come alive tonight and get me? And of course my answer was, no, it's just a head, it's just bones. Those bones can't come to life. And so from a human perspective, no, you stand in a valley of bones and they're not going to come to life. There's nothing to be scared of. But at the same time, there's no hope in it. However, Ezekiel says, only you know that, God. In other words, anything's possible with you. I don't really see any hope in it, but you can cause that. And so in verse 4, God says to Ezekiel, prophesy over these bones. Dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. So God says to Ezekiel, I want you to stand in this valley and I want you to preach to these bones. Now, I don't know about you, but when I picture that in my mind, I think, what a crazy thing to do. To stand in a valley and actually call them by name. God says, call them dry bones. That's their name. That's what they are. And I want you to preach to them, Ezekiel. And God even tells them exactly what to say to the bones. Ezekiel is to say, I'm bringing the breath of life to you, and you will come to life. I will attach sinews. I will put meat on your bones. I will cover you with skin. You'll come alive and realize that I am God. Now, there's absolutely no indication of what Ezekiel thinks about this, about being in a valley of bones and asked to preach to them. Obviously, it's unusual. Maybe he's just used to it. But as I thought about that and prayed over this, I thought, how does that apply to us? And then I was like, there are moments in our life when God asks us to do things. He prompts our spirit. And it's such a good question to ask yourself, will I do what God asks me to do? When it's uncomfortable, when it's weird, when it might be embarrassing, when other people might see it? Beth Moore tells a really good story, I think that fits into this. She talks about, for those of you who don't know her, she's just a Christian speaker, but she talks about being in an airport terminal in Knoxville, Tennessee. And she said that she had this awesome morning worshiping with the Lord. And she was sitting there for a layover, and she had her Bible on her lap, and she was getting ready for a talk. And she said, I was just really so excited about God and what I was getting ready to do. And she said as she was sitting there, this old man gets pushed in a wheelchair kind of across and down a little ways from her in the terminal. And she said she couldn't take her eyes off of him. She said he looked like he was 200 years old. And she said he was skin and bones and veins. And she said his clothes were so big on him it looked like a coat hanger was holding his shirt up. With, his shoulders were wide and bony, but there was nothing, there was just no meat on him. She said he was hunched over. And she said the most compelling thing about him was she said he had this gray, stringy hair that was knotted and matted almost to his bottom. And she said it was just a horrific sight, but yet at the same time she couldn't look away from it. And she said as she sat there that she just felt the Spirit of the Lord stirring in her. And her immediate thought was, God, please don't make me witness to this man. God, please don't let me have to do anything to this man. And she said that the Spirit of the Lord, she said, I just felt it in me, and I just kept arguing with God. Put me next to him on the plane, and I'll talk to him there. But don't make me get up in front of all of these people and talk to him. I mean, what am I supposed to do, God?